This is the Jeff Santos Show.
A little guess who for you. You can guess who is our next guest, of course. He is, of course, a great writer based in Seattle, Washington. He can give you the latest, not only happening in the Puget Sound area, but around the West Coast. And he, of course, is with us every Tuesday. It is so great to have Mark Taylor-Canfield as part of the show every Tuesday. And he joins us live from Seattle. Mark, how are you?
Good. It's another sunny day in Seattle, but don't tell people that because, you know, we don't want everyone to move here. It's raining. Just believe that.
Yeah, but it will be in another month or so, right? I remember my days living on the West Coast and fly into Seattle in November and December with a lot of cloud cover, but that's all right. You guys know how to get outside with it without it. We get lots of stuff to talk about, but I want to start off with some good news, and it is so cool to see that our friends, and I'm being facetious here, Shell decided to stop its Arctic drilling operations off the coast of Alaska. And I think a lot of the people that we've seen from Portland to up to Alaska in the kayaks have, they have been, in my opinion, heroes here in fighting against massive, massive ships. And they got a victory. Hooray for the underdog and the small guy. Your thoughts about this? This is big news.
Yes, it is definitely an international news story. And after spending $4 billion just lobbying for the permits on this Arctic drilling project, Shell has decided that they are no longer going to work off the coast of Alaska, which is the only Arctic drilling going on at the moment. And there's a lot of reasons have been attributed. A lot of various factors, including poor drilling results, government regulation, and the drop in the price of oil. But it's pretty obvious to most observers that one of the major reasons is the big pushback from environmental groups like Greenpeace, the Sierra Club, the Audubon Society, even the courtesy of Shell. Also, you know, the kayaktivist was a big story. In Seattle, 500 kayakers surrounded the drilling platform that they brought into Elliott Bay in Seattle, the Polar Pioneer. And that was a major issue in itself because of the fact that our own city council, officials from Martin Luther King Jr. County, and state officials claimed that Shell was violating local laws by illegally staging in Elliott Bay. So it also caused a big controversy with the Port Commission. One meeting where protesters were physically forced out of the Port Commission chambers by Seattle police. And I'm currently producing a documentary on the issue, so I've been following the story pretty closely for months now. One of the things that people should know is that Greenpeace has been calling for an international sanctuary around the North Pole, which would prohibit oil drilling. And that's due to alarms about the effects of global climate change on the Arctic regions of the planet. So Shell still has a lot of oil claims in the Arctic, so it remains to be seen exactly what they decide to do with them. But for now, the environmental groups are claiming a major victory for the planet.
Well, I tell you, you got to look at all the efforts that were done by not only environmental groups, but a lot of young people, those just out of college. I think it's a really, really great victory, and it goes to show you that you can take on Goliath and win, and you can take on the powerful interest and win, and that's something that we can all learn throughout this country, and I think it's a big, big, big victory. Now, before we switch to a not so good issue in the Seattle Police Department. I want to get your thoughts here of where are these folks that are activists in the environmental community, the kayakers and others. Are they getting involved in political campaigns? Are they staying with this one issue? I mean, are these potential Bernie Sanders, liberal Democrats, are they getting involved there? Because obviously this is a a jolt of energy, and a lot of the campaigns could use it.
Yes, well, there were a lot of labor union members involved. Our own city council members might go. If you go to a protest, regardless of what the particular issue, if it seems to be something that really attracting a lot of attention in terms of politics, then you will find there's a big tradition of progressive electioneering and activism in Seattle. And so, yes, you'll definitely find the same people testifying at city council meetings on other issues like affordable housing or, campaigning for Bernie Sanders. It's definitely across the political lines in terms of the number of people and the amount of support. We had major state officials and King County officials who were also siding with the protesters. It was one of the first times in my life, Jeff, where I've heard political representatives begging the protesters to show up at the ports. Please,
wow,
please
that's
help
awesome.
us with their plea. Yeah, they felt pretty powerless to this multinational corporation show. I think, like $5,000 a day or something, for having the oil rig, the Polar Pioneer in Elliott Bay at the port of Seattle. Nick Licata, our council member, told us during a press briefing that's a drop in the bucket for Shell. They really don't care. And his statement during that press briefing for Democracy Watch News was actually, this company believes it's too big to have to follow local law. So that was a statement from our own city council member about how Shell treated the community and the controversy that it caused. Unfortunately, the port commissioners kind of stood aside and let it happen. And so that became very contentious, and it's caused a shakeup during these new port commission elections, because there are some activists now who are running no more status quo. You can't claim to be this great green port and then, have Shell's oil rigs sitting out there, this platform that could be seen all across the city. It just didn't, it was a contradiction in terms of what they state their policy is and their plan for the future of the Port of Seattle. They really have been stressing the fact that they want to be a green port. So it's been politically divisive, and I think it's going to cause a shakeup on the Port Commission as well, which is probably needed. Actually,
now, is that appointed by the governor or regional states, and is there appointees on that board?
It's actually an elected office, so there are election campaigns, and the hope amongst a lot of progressives, of course, is to get some folks on there who may help represent some of the union ideals of the longshoremen and Teamsters, especially who work at the port. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes you get so-called progressive candidates who later there for one reason, which they have stated over and over again, which is to make money. For the port. They feel that that's their main mission, and they're very proud of the fact that they have increased the profits of the port, which also, by the way, the Port of Seattle also owns SeaTac Airport. SeaTac International Airport was in a big court battle over the $15 an hour minimum wage.
Right, exactly.
And a quick update on that, the University of Washington has finally agreed, after numerous protests by students, to raise the minimum wage at that state university to $15 an hour. They were kind of balking at the idea, saying we're a state university, we don't have to follow Seattle city law, but that's another case in point where activism has the members of the Board of Regents, and they've decided, no, we are going to do this and set a good example for the rest of the country as well. So about 5,500 employees at the University of Washington will now be making $15 an hour minimum wage.
That's fantastic, and that's what we need to do across this country, and that's why you're hearing a lot of the different presidential candidates and those running for Congress and Senate echoing that as well. We're going to come back to continue a conversation with Mark Taylor-Canfield. You can join in the conversation at 844-3-SANTOS. We'll talk about a great investigative reporting piece that our friends at the Seattle Times. Not good, folks. We're right back, though. We'll talk about it. It's the Jeff Santos Show. Mark Taylor-Canfield. He's at bat. Back in a flash. Welcome back. It is indeed the Jeff Santos Show that you're tuned into. You can give us a call if you want at 844-372-6867. Email me, Jeff at revolutionboston.com. You can post and check us out on both Facebook and Twitter at Jeff Santos Show. We're talking with Mark Taylor-Canfield, a great independent journalist out of Seattle. And, Mark, it seems like there are a few of you out there, and a few are working for the Seattle Times in terms of good journalists, doing a really great story on police and police abuse, and some 213 people being killed by police since 2005 in the state of Washington. Lots to examine here, and a lot of credit to your colleagues at the Seattle Times. Give us more insight, Mark.
Yeah, well, it's been a very interesting news week with Xi Jinping, the president of China, leader of the largest communist nation in the world, who was actually having business meetings with some of the wealthiest capitalists in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of interesting, especially with all the
Gates and Jobs and Tim Cook, I should say.
Warren Buffett, yeah. But, meanwhile, human rights abuses in China, so people were wondering why that wasn't a topic of conversation at those meetings. Maybe it was, I don't know, but most of those were private meetings. On the same day, U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch was in Seattle talking about President Obama's community policing initiative and also this current consent decree between the Seattle Police Department and the Department of Justice. And that's over reforms that have been ordered resulting from the DOJ's 8-month review of the police department finding excessive use of force. And they also investigated the racial profiling issue at the Seattle Police Department. So it's a huge issue in the community. It's been an issue for a long time. There's always been an ongoing effort to create a civilian police review board for oversight. I wouldn't say hold the city hostage, but they basically tell them this is the way it's going to be. There was even a lawsuit that was filed against Kathleen O'Toole, who was the former police commissioner of Boston, who is now the Seattle police chief. And so 100 police officers got together as soon as she was hired to help reform the department. And they filed a lawsuit against her and our U.S. Attorney General because of the DOJ investigation. That got thrown out of court. And so the reforms are supposedly moving on, but there are commissioners with a local community group who are sort of an independent group that's trying to oversee the police department, and they feel that they've been left out of the entire process, so they're very critical of these reforms that are supposedly happening with the police department. But case in point, the Seattle Times did an excellent job of investigative reporting. Steve Miltich, Christine Wilmson, Mike Carter, and Justin Mayo did a very long, in-depth report with lots of statistics, and facts abound in this article. They cite their sources. It's very, very good journalism. And what they found is that since 2005, 213 people have been killed by police in Washington state. Out of those 213 cases, only one police officer has ever been prosecuted.
That's outrageous.
That was a very serious case where a man was beaten by a Spokane police officer and wasn't even actually... he was suspected of a crime that he didn't commit to begin with, but the police officer basically attacked him in a convenience store. They caught it on the security camera, and that police officer is now found Carl Thompson Jr., the Spokane police officer, guilty, and he is serving 51 months in a federal prison. But the rest of these cases have been largely unadjudicated. Some of the police officers have been fired from departments for this activity when they find an unjustified shooting. But the problem here, and by the way, this started in Seattle, especially with a Native American woodcarver named John T. Williams, and the Seattle Times, in their online version, has a video, and they also include a link to the dash cam video from the police car where John T. Williams was killed. And in that case, the video shows that the officer gave Mr. Williams about 4 seconds to drop his woodcarving knife before he was shot. So there's been some very questionable cases. The Seattle Times does a good job of just presenting the facts. One of the shocking indictments here is that there is a much larger percentage of African Americans who have been killed. In terms of the 10% were African Americans, and the state population is only 3.6% black. So it's highly disproportionate. And the problem, and we even have attorneys like King County Prosecutor Dan Saderberg has said that the problem is that in Washington State, it's the only state in the union, and according to Amnesty International, Washington State has the weakest laws in terms of prosecuting police officers on these issues.
Well, let me ask you, because I think this is an important piece, because I think one of the things that were mentioned was that Spokane, and you mentioned one of the issues there. I mean, I look at it that there is a huge divide between East and West Washington State. We all know it's very conservative East in the Spokane area and very progressive in the Seattle area. Those stats, how much of it relates to what happens outside of King County in Seattle? And
I think it's more, they're more concentrating on the state as a whole. So I think I would have to go into their documentation, which includes some studies that they've done. They have a database set up, and try to find that out. Jeff, that's a good question. I think my personal experience is that some of the, if not the majority of cases, the largest percentage, but some of the highest publicity, the most publicized cases have actually been on the west side of the state. A very famous case out of Snohomish County where a police officer was found not guilty after he shot a driver who was sitting in his car. And there have been, many cases in King County, in Pierce County, that brought out lots of protesters. And so when the Ferguson protests happened, that has, been a long-term issue in Seattle. So no one was really surprised that other police departments are having this problem. And there is a major anti-police brutality march coming up on October 22nd. So that's a tradition in Seattle as well.
Well, I'm going to check on that. Mark, we will check in next Tuesday. Thank you for the update, my friend. It is always, well, it's really fantastic to have you as a weekly contributor. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, my man. Great stuff.
Thanks, Jeff. You can check out my articles at Truth Out and Daily Post and all over the place. So I'll see you next week.
Talk to you next week. That's Mark Taylor-Canfield.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
News this hour from townhall.com. I'm Rich Thomason. The president of Planned Parenthood called to Capitol Hill to defend the organization's use of taxpayer dollars.
Cecile Richards being grilled by Ohio's Jim Jordan over those secretly recorded videos.
Everyone knows these videos are, as the Speaker of the House said, barbaric and repulsive.
Richards calling the videos part of an ongoing smear campaign.
The outrageous accusations leveled against Planned Parenthood based on heavily doctored videos are offensive and categorically untrue.
Jordan asking why Richards initially apologized for the videos.
If something's untrue and false, you don't apologize for that. You correct the record.
Critics want to transfer up to $500 million in federal funds to community-based health organizations.
Capitol Hill correspondent Wally Hines. The first trial of a Baltimore police officer charged in the death of Freddie Gray will be held November 30th, with trials for 5 other officers charged in the case set for early next year. A parole board has once again denied clemency for the only woman on Georgia's death row. Kelly Renee Gissendaner was convicted of murder in the 1997 stabbing death of her husband.